Hi and welcome to the Malat Cookery channel. So this is our third video in the barbecue basics series. If you haven't seen the first two videos, then please go and watch those because this one does follow on from that. So in this video I'm going to show you how to actually cook the meat that we've prepared in the first two videos. So for that we're going to show you how to actually light the barbecue if you're using coals, how to set the barbecue up so that you can cook on it straight away, how to create different cooking zones on a basic barbecue, and the reason we've chosen the three pieces of meat that we have, so we've got the steak, the chicken and the fish, is because they will utilize the different cooking zones that we set up. So there's a lot to do in this video. Let's crack on and get started. Right, before we go outside, just some of the real basics about the barbecue itself. So you don't need to go to any great expense if you haven't already bought your barbecue. Don't forget, the basics of barbecuing is just a few stones, a heat source and a grate, and that's as fancy as it gets. My advice would be, if you haven't already purchased a barbecue, go for something like a simple kettle barbecue, which is the round one with a lid. You can pick those up brand new in the UK for about £25. That's basically all you'll need. With regard to the fuel source, there's no barbecue snobbery here, but unfortunately as you get into barbecuing and you go onto some of the forums, you will find some what I call barbecue snobbery. I don't care whether you're using gas, whether you're using lump wood charcoal, briquettes, virgin wood, it doesn't matter to me, because barbecuing is much more than just cooking the food. It's a social side, it's about being outside, it's the whole experience. And you can produce some really good results no matter what fuel source you're using. So don't be bullied into thinking that using charcoal, briquettes or virgin wood is the only way to barbecue. It's not. You can produce some really decent results using gas barbecues as well. Obviously though, a gas barbecue will become more expensive and the fuel is more expensive as well. So you have to bear that in mind. So the first thing we want to do then is to obviously light the barbecue. So I've got some firelighters here. I'm using lump wood. Now lump wood is an irregular shaped fuel. That gives me a little bit more versatility. It comes in large pieces and small pieces. I've placed the firelighters at an even distance. I'm then going to place the lump wood over the top in a nice neat pile on one side of the fire grate, and then obviously light the firelighters. Now initially what I'll do is I normally grade the lump wood from the bag, place the large pieces to one side and use the smaller pieces for the initial burn. It's similar to when you're starting a wood fire where you use kindling. So the smaller piece of lump wood won't last very long, but they'll certainly get the barbecue going a lot more quickly than if you place larger pieces on initially. So we've got the lump wood in a fairly nice even pile over the top of the firelighters. As you can see, the lump wood is quite a small size. This is what I use initially for the burn to get the barbecue up to temperature quickly. We've left some of the firelighter exposed so we can get to it with a match. So the next thing to do is obviously light the firelighters. We're then going to leave it, and what we're waiting for is like a fine white ash to appear over the vast majority of the coals, and that's when you know that it's up to temperature and then we can start cooking. So the lump wood, it now has that white ash over the top, vast majority of it, so everything's good to go. We just need to replace the cooking grate over the top. We're going to put the lid down on the barbecue, make sure that everything gets up to temperature before we attempt to start cooking the meat. Cooking on a barbecue is no different in that respect to cooking in the kitchen. Make sure that everything's up to temperature before we start actually attempting to cook the meat on the barbecue. Okay, so that's a great season now. So we've now got our three cooking zones. We've got direct heat, which is over the top of the coals. We've got indirect heat, which is next to the coals. And then we've got like a very basic oven, and that's on the indirect side with the actual lid down. The first thing we're going to do is the chicken, so the tandoori chicken. Initially we're going to be cooking that on the indirect side of the actual barbecue itself. So our tandoori chicken is now going to cook for 20 minutes on the indirect side of the barbecue. After 20 minutes we're then going to turn the chicken over and cook for a further 20 minutes. In total the chicken should take around an hour in a barbecue. So lid down now, 20 minutes, and then we'll come back to it. So the chicken's now been cooking for 20 minutes on the barbecue. What we need to do now is turn the chicken over and cook for a further 20 minutes. What you'll notice is because we got everything up to temperature and we seasoned the grill correctly, the chicken won't stick. So the last part of the cooking now is to actually sear the chicken over the hot coals. So we've been cooking indirectly. We now want to shift the chicken over onto the direct cooking part of the barbecue, 10 minutes either side, and that will sear the meat and create a really nice colour and also a flavour as well. So traditionally you think of searing meat at the start of the cooking process. I'll explain in more detail later in the video why we do this at the end and not at the start. So that's the tandoori chicken cooked. I'm going to clean the grill off now and then we'll move on to the steak. This is going to go into a Pyrex dish covered in foil and just kept warm in the oven. So now that our tandoori chicken is cooked to perfection, I just wanted to explain a little bit about searing or cooking over a high heat. So when we sear foodstuffs, we get what's called a Maillard reaction. So that's M-A-I-L-L-A-R-D. So that's a little bit of homework if you want to go off and search that, do a little bit more investigation. So the Maillard reaction is where amino acids and reducing sugars come together, and cooks or chefs will use that Maillard reaction for three basic reasons. One is to colour the food. So when we sear a piece of meat in a pan or over a barbecue, we get that lovely brown texture and look to the piece of meat. Now the Maillard reaction is also called the browning reaction, so that's where that name comes from. The second thing is the flavour. We get this intense flavour when we sear something. And the third one, especially when we're in a kitchen using a pan, is we get a lot of deposits left in the pan following the searing of the meat. And those deposits are used to coat things like vegetables, for example potatoes, or when you're roasting them in the oven. But when we're doing something like a Sunday roast, those deposits in the pan are used to make the gravy. So we normally sear the meat at the start of the cooking process. Now with regard to barbecues, we don't obviously cook in a pan, we're cooking on an open grate, so we lose those deposits. So basically a barbecue cook or chef will use searing for two reasons. One is the colour and the other one is the intense flavour. So we do lose those deposits. So as barbecue cooks or chefs, we actually lose those deposits that we would normally find in a pan because we're cooking on an open grate. Now one of the things with the Maillard reaction, one of the downsides to it is that the Maillard reaction, when we sear a piece of meat, we actually kickstart the moisture loss from that piece of meat. So contrary to what some people believe, that when we sear a piece of meat, we're actually sealing the meat and we hold the juices in, we're actually doing the exact opposite. So if we don't get those deposits in the pan to make the gravy or to coat vegetables in, it begs the question that if we do kickstart this moisture loss, why do we sear the piece of meat at the start of the barbecue? Why not wait till towards the end, and theoretically we'll end up with a juicier piece of meat? Now I've done some very unscientific tests regarding this, where I've cooked a piece of meat, I've seared it on the barbecue at the start and then cooked it an identical piece of meat. I've waited till the end and then seared the piece of meat, and I'm convinced that if we delay the searing of the actual piece of meat on the barbecue, we will end up with a much juicier piece of meat. So that's why when we cooked our tandoori chicken, we used the indirect cooking method at the start and waited to sear those pieces of chicken till the end. Hope that explains it. So the next thing we want to cook is the steak. possibly the easiest thing you can cook on a barbecue. You just got to remember a couple of things. One is, remember to rest the steak before it goes onto the barbecue and after. About 15 minutes before, take it out of the fridge, make sure it rests before you actually cook it, and then after cooking, just make sure it gets time to rest again before you actually eat it. So I want this medium, and that means I'm going to do about 2 to 2.5 minutes either side on the barbecue, and we are going to cook it over the coals. So we'll do direct cooking straight over the coals, 2.5 minutes either side. So that's our flame grilled steak cooked. Again, there couldn't be anything easier than that. Nice medium steak, well seasoned. So next I'm going to rearrange the coals to cook the fish. So the last method we're going to look at with the barbecue is actually using the barbecue as a basic oven. So what I've done with the coals is I've actually arranged them on the outside of the actual tray itself, leaving the centre as the indirect cooking zone. We're going to cook the piece of fish that we prepared yesterday in the centre of the actual barbecue itself, and the idea is that the heat will circulate around the outside and cook the piece of fish evenly on all sides. We're going to cook the fish for 5 minutes on either side. Now this is only possible because everything is up to temperature, and this actual grate that we're going to cook on is well seasoned. Otherwise the fish has a tendency to stick like concrete. So again, as I said before in the video, make sure that everything is up to temperature and the actual grate itself is well seasoned. And then just close the lid. Again, 5 minutes on either side and it will be done perfectly. So it's been cooking for 5 minutes now. It's just a case of turning this over. So that's the fish cooked. So this method of actually having the coals around the outside of the fire tray is ideal for things like fish, because if we had the fish to one side of the actual coals as we did before, where the coals were on the right hand side and the food was on the left, the fish would, so delicate, it would tend to burn on one side. So this gives heat all circulating all around the fish and it cooks nice and evenly. This is also ideal for things like a whole chicken. Could place a whole chicken in the centre here, or a large piece of meat, so we're going to cook it for an extended length of time. You can also put a small tray directly underneath the actual meat itself. So something like chicken, all the juices would drip into the tray, and then you could use those juices to make a gravy. So that's it. The next thing we're going to do with the fish is we're going to use the brine that we made yesterday and turn that into a nice sauce to have with the fish. So we want to now produce a sauce for the fish that we grilled. So we've got the brine, which the fish has been sat in overnight. That's going to form the basis of our actual sauce for the fish. And again, serving fish with a sauce, as I said in our second video, where fish is quite a delicate meat and has the potential to dry out, when we serve it with a sauce, that will certainly help, especially at a buffet style presentation, to keep that fish as moist as possible. So here we've got 2 tablespoons of plain flour, all-purpose flour. We've got a large knob of butter. I'm also going to add in some olive oil as well into the sauce. And we've got half a medium-sized onion diced. So the first thing we need to do is add the butter and a glug of olive oil, and then we bring that up to temperature and let all that melt, and then we're going to be frying the onion until it becomes translucent. So now that the pan's up to temperature, the first thing we need to add is our onion. So this is a medium heat. I'm just looking to actually soften the onion, that's all. So the onion has now started to soften, started to become translucent. The next thing we want to add to the pan is the plain flour or all-purpose flour. Just reduce the heat down, and we just want to cook this through for about a minute. So what we're actually producing here is something called a roux, and this will help thicken the sauce. So that flour is now cooked through. Now we want to add the brine, just a little bit at a time. If we do it this way, rather than add all of the brine in at the same time, then we're not going to get any lumps in the sauce at all. So I can smell all of that intense flavour from the fish. It's been sat in the brine overnight, and then obviously from the Memphis dust as well. So we're just going to reduce the heat down a little bit further. This is now going to simmer for about 10 minutes, and it will start to thicken up quite nicely. Once it thickens, you know that the sauce is done. That'll be ready to serve with the fish. So the sauce has been simmering gently now for about 10 minutes. It's nice and thick, just how we need it. Using a roux, the sauce will take slightly longer to thicken than if you're using just corn flour. As with everything that we cook, we just need to have a quick taste. It definitely needs a little bit of seasoning. So freshly ground black pepper and some sea salt. That's much better. Okay, so that's the end of this video. Just to recap then, we've cooked our tandoori chicken using direct and indirect cooking. We've cooked our steak using purely direct cooking, and we've also cooked our fish using a basic oven method, which is the ring of fire, where we place the coals on the outside of the actual firebox. Now, we've also looked at the Maillard reaction and how the searing effect actually affects the cooking, and whether we should do that at the start of the barbecuing or towards the end. Again, that's up to you, but personally I feel that towards the end of the cooking process is better to produce a more moist piece of meat. In our next video, I'm going to, and that will be the final video I think in this series, I'm going to look at some serving suggestions for barbecues as well, which will make your life easier and also make it more enjoyable for the guests. So as usual, please subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more videos coming out, and if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Thanks for watching.